going back to any advice for people starting a system or a facility, I always suggest, and sometimes even if they say no, I'll still design a test system and just include it in the drawing anyway. There's nothing more important than that.
Welcome to Visionary Aquaponics, a podcast dedicated to inspiring a global aquaponics movement for food freedom, water wisdom, and permaculture-inspired aquaponics. Keep listening for the best advice from the world's pioneers and visionaries in backyard and commercial aquaponics. And now, here's your host, Maribou Latour.
So do you operate on the low-density fish ratios and concentrate on plant growth, or what do you prefer?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
it depends. It depends on, a lot of times the client will insist that way, but most of them, once they hear, hey, you're not really going to grow very many fish and you're paying for aeration and temperature controls and all of that stuff, why not grow more fish? And of course, with Tim and Suzanne at Friendly Aquaponics, I've had conversations with them about this, and we don't disagree really. I think that it's just a matter of there's one way of doing it and another way. And so yes, the answer to the question is yes, sometimes, but I'm really migrating. Well, I have been for years now, migrating toward the higher density and finding a source that can use the extra nutrients in that water.
So aquaponics is explained as a closed-loop system, yet it still requires inputs from the outside in the form of sunlight and heat, electricity, aeration, fish food, and media. How do you make your aquaponic systems more efficient? What makes your systems more efficient?
I don't think you can't close the loop. Well, you could. I mean, I guess, there's those glass bottles where the old guy is sitting there holding it and he says, for 20 years, I've never added anything to this. It's an ecosystem in and of itself within that glass.
He's also never taken anything out.
Vessel. Right. Yeah. And so, right. Exactly. And that's where it can't be closed loop. So, the mechanical energy, calories are lost, in even the best systems. You're inputting, you're outputting, you're bringing things out. So, no, it's not a closed loop system. Someone got very mad at me on one of the forums when I said that after he defined it as a closed loop, and I really feel bad if he took it personally, but it's not. It's not a closed loop. How we make them more efficient is through methods like heat transfer, low head pumping, large pipes that don't clog, overflow prevention systems. So I'm using the word efficient not just in terms of power, but also in terms of avoiding situations that will cost you time and money. And so those are the things that we focus on.
Do you believe that either aquaponics or hydroorganics is one of the most sustainable food production systems in the world?
I think so far. Yeah, I think it's one of them. I think definitely. I think that again, back to the question of the evolution of aquaponics, I think it's only going to get better as long as, it is going to evolve. Whether people who like the stricter definition want it to or not, it's going to. The focus has to be on growing food, not on creating a definition. Mm-hmm. And that's just true. So, is it the most, we're using minute amounts of water, in comparison to field crops. And, so when somebody says that this system uses 20% less water than a field grown crop, that's kind of the backwards way of saying it. It's more like you're getting more biomass with the same amount of water.
Yeah.
Because like you go out to California and you see, or Wisconsin, or even here in Texas, where they're just spraying these plumes of water, almost like they're trying to put out a house fire, up into the air. And Molly, you read me a stat once. I think it was like 70% of the water is evaporated right into the air before it ever touches. Mm-hmm. It's no wonder that 80% of California's water supply is being used by ag, because they're using it poorly. I say that with a little tinge of anger in my voice because I'm most recently looking at these pictures of the state that I was born in. And wow. It's just what happened there, and why are they still bottling water? Why are they still shooting plumes of water into the air? It's a mess. The whole issue with migrant workers. People say, can small scale farming be profitable? The biggest hurdle are the subsidies that are given out to large scale farmers, and the employees that they're pulling in and paying dollars a day How do you compete with that? I think time will compete with that is what's going to happen. And we're seeing it right now.
Tell us about a problem you or your clients had with plant diseases and how you were able to cure it through your integrated pest management strategies.
So, when Jesse was brought into Sweetwater, initially it was a lighting consultation to see what kind of lighting that they would need to add. They already had a lot of pests that had found their way into the building. One of them that had gotten particularly bad was the aphid infestation. I actually came in to take pictures before I was even an employee there. I have a huge interest and love for photography, and I took some macro shots of the aphid infestation on a single leaf so we could send it off to the local entomologist for analysis and recommendations. And Jesse sent off this email with this one photograph of a leaf. It was just covered in aphids. It looked like it had been rolled in sesame seeds or something. It was incredibly... Anyway, within like 5 minutes, he had already gotten an email back from this entomologist who said this was the most incredible thing she had ever seen because there were 5 separate generations of aphids in this one photograph, and she wanted to know if she could use it for teaching purposes. So that's what we came into at Sweetwater, and we learned what the most effective ways were to really combat that infestation through a lot of trials, a lot of different strategies. We still maintain to this day that the best offense, or the best defense is a good offense. The reason why the plants had been so covered in aphids is because they weren't getting enough light. They were stretching to try and find the light. They were being fed an excess of nitrogen without any of the micronutrients that they really needed to mount a strong defense. That was just the beginning of my photography career at Sweetwater. I was able to get macro photos and even videos when we introduced a gallon of ladybugs into that system. Periodically, we would every week we would release a couple cups of them, distributed evenly throughout the system, and then they would lay eggs, and the larvae would hatch, and they go through 7 instars of different development stages, and they just devour aphids as they go. And I was able to get some really fantastic shots of that whole process. And then, there were other things in the system as well, thrips and spider mites. There was this was an old warehouse with super tall ceilings and windows lining the top walls. And the windows were removed during the summer in order for screens to be installed. However, the screens were not the right fit, so they ended up being set aside, and the windows were completely open to the outside air during the night. This happens to also be, if you've ever had a garage light or something that's left on at night, you know how the moths and insects just are drawn to that light and they just can't stay away. We ran the lights at Sweetwater during the night in order to receive a discount from the power company for off-peak usage. So if you can picture just thousands of watts of electric light and then like these open high windows, it was an incredible survey of the local insect populations that we conducted there.
We were a beacon. Yeah.
We really were.
Wow.
And I was able to get photographs of a lot of those insects and the damage, and also kind of work to treat all of those various things that got introduced as well. Integrated pest management is already established for a lot of, those principles are really well established. They've been proven to work. Instead of just blasting things with pesticides, it definitely makes sense to survey, to do targeted management strategies. We really like using predator insects whenever possible because they have the least amount of impact on the system's biology. But overall, just making sure your system is balanced and growing strong plants is huge. Powdery mildew and those things tend to work their way into greenhouse growing situations, and Jesse's come up with some really great strategies for that. If you'd like to speak to that, Jesse. But it's amazing to see, when you are especially growing in a warehouse, it's so far removed from the outside environment until suddenly it isn't, and then you have to deal with the repercussions.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the things we were using, azadirachtin was one, and one thing, I got to be very careful about how I say this. Anytime you the phrase "ask your doctor first." Make sure you test this product on a small sample of clothing before you, or your couch or before you spray it. Same thing with the plant growing systems, the fish growing systems. Azadirachtin is one of those ones that has this huge scary label on the back that says, something to the effect of obliterates aquatic organisms or something. It's very strongly worded. And after speaking with enough people who helped design this product and even a lot of chemists who had nothing to do with it but understood it, we realized that it really didn't have it doesn't kill fish. At least not in the concentrations that you're going to get when you've already diluted it before you're spraying it, and now you're spraying it and you've got hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. It's really not going to have that big of an impact. And the azadirachtin worked really, really well. What was the sugar product, the sucral, do you remember what the name of that was? You recommended it to Ken and Jessica at Ouroboros when you were struggling with bugs. I can't remember the name of that product.
You said, what was the name of that thing you said you spray that has
Azadirachtin is the active component in neem.
Oh.
So a lot of people are familiar with neem, but azadirachtin is the active compound, and it has been isolated and concentrated.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not really sure.
Definitely not as much of a endocrine and hormone disruptor as some of the alternatives, for sure.
Right.
Atrazine.
Yeah. No, that's terrible.
You just have to be. I think with like the neem oil, what you got to be careful with is the fact that it's an oil. Mm-hmm. And when it gets in the water, it can cause issues. But again, in the amounts that you should be using, it's not harmful. Now somebody's going to kill their system and come back and be like, that Jesse told me to, but that's, again, test it first, right. Find out in a small sample, find out. There's nothing more important. And this is something, going back to, any advice for people starting a system or a facility. I always suggest, and sometimes even if they say no, I'll still design a test system and just include it in the drawing anyway. There's nothing more important than that. Anytime you're wanting to advance, anytime you're wanting to try a new product, people, you have a farm, people are going to be sending you products left and right. And the best place to try that out is a little 4-foot by 8-foot, system with some fish in it and some plants growing in it. And, you're not risking the rest of your facility at that point, and we design filtration systems where the air is filtered through HEPA and carbon filters before it actually even enters the facility, which is definitely overkill, but still. I definitely try to impress on people the importance of a test system for trying products.
Have you guys found a solution for the mold and mildew that accumulates in a lot of moist greenhouse environments?
The potassium bicarbonate is one that's really good. We actually sprayed down the entire pad, the gravel pad of a greenhouse that had sat for a year. It was supposed to be used right away, and it hadn't been, so it sat for a while. We sprayed that down.
Potassium bicarbonate?
Potassium bicarbonate.
Interesting, because somebody else uses sodium bicarbonate or baking soda.
Yeah, and I obviously, per what we've been saying in other parts of this interview, we try to avoid sodium. So sodium bicarbonate is going to be much cheaper, but you're probably talking pennies and nickels, and why worry about it? Potassium bicarbonate is basically going to supply your plants, and if it gets into the water, your plants again with potassium. Baking soda is something that it's usually on hand. So like if you've got a home system and suddenly you've got a problem, the sodium bicarbonate, if, the hydroponic store is closed or whatever, then it's on hand and it's able to use. But as a recurring process, a recurring method, I wouldn't suggest it.
So do the plants never extract any of that sodium out of the system, or are you always building salt in your system if you add anything like that to it?
Both. Like I mentioned earlier, we had lettuce that actually tasted like salt. Was it Adam? Somebody else said that they were working with somebody that added salt to their system, and the same thing happened. The amounts that you're having to add in order to combat nitrite toxicity are greater than the plant is going to be able to take up. So yes, you are going to be left with deposits. And if you're running a recirculating system and you're not dumping that water, but just adding more water to it, the sodium isn't evaporating, and you'll go like the one example I gave where you went from 32 parts per million to 300 and something parts per million of sodium. Really quick. That happened in like 2 or 3 months.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And how big of a system?
Gosh, I would guess maybe 20,000 gallons.
Yeah, I would guess that as well.
But, it really doesn't matter because you're not talking about gallons. You're talking about ratios.
Right.
Yeah. That's another question we haven't touched on is the ratio, the plant to fish to water.
So what proportions do you recommend for pounds of fish to gallons of water to crops? Some people have rules of thumb. Do you?
We do have rules of thumb. Molly did a wonderful calculator. She made a wonderful calculator based upon ratios that we figured out, but we didn't. It actually comes out to fish per gallons, but that's not how we figured it out. Because it's not about the fish or the gallons. It's about the capabilities of your system. So, mechanical and biological filtration, aeration, water temperature control, because if your water gets too hot, your DO drops no matter how much aeration you're doing. Those are the variables to plan ahead of time, based on how many fish you want and how much and what type of feed you're going to be giving those fish. So, focusing on, what you want to do. Like I said, when somebody asks to design a system, one of the first questions we ask is, what do you want to grow? If somebody says we need to grow 500 pounds of fish in a certain number of time, then we go from that and we design the system and all of its components around that biomass. And then use the type of feed that particular fish would take at various intervals of its growth and go from there. And then it can come down to fish per gallons in a kind of weird way. You definitely want to provide enough space for the fish to grow in. I mean, there's a lot of fish that simply won't grow very big if they're packed in to a tight space. I think that's what happened to the perch at Sweetwater. And then of course on the other side of that, the systems that I'm designing now are really, really heavy on the water, right? I want that thermal mass. I want that buffer like I talked about earlier. And, that doesn't matter because with hydroponics, what you're doing is you're adding a certain amount of chemicals to get an EC or electroconductivity, measurement. Parts per million was the term that was used before, the scale that was used before. So you have to add a certain amount of chemicals to get that level of nutrients or the plants won't grow well. Well, with fish, with aquaponics, what you're doing is you're just waiting for the fish to excrete enough waste into the water to the point where it does have that nutrient level. So that's a good example of why it doesn't matter if you have too much water compared to fish. It's not about that. It's about the components of the system.
So speaking on aquaponics and hydroponics, have you guys noticed a difference between the sweetness of the lettuce grown in aquaponic systems as opposed to hydroponic systems?
Definitely.
Absolutely. I found that the lettuce in an aquaponic system. Do you remember, Molly? The lettuce was actually, in a lot of cases, was actually thicker. Like it was almost like, by thicker, I don't mean wider and longer. I mean actually like when you looked at the frontal view, like the profile, like if you were looking from the, down the bow of a ship, it was actually thicker. There was more biomass in that leaf and definitely sweeter. It grew like that. In hydroponics, what I found is it has a lot more water weight. And this isn't always the case, but a lot of times. And hydroponic technicians will argue tooth and nail about there can't be any difference because all you're doing is supplying the nutrients. But time and time again, we found the lettuce to be heavier, thicker, more of a mouthfeel, and definitely tasted better in aquaponics and organic hydroponics versus synthetic.
How have you been able to respond to your local market and clientele? Are there any types of systems that you're developing for crops that you'd like to talk about?
Kind of touched on that, the field crops, the systems around the crops, definitely. So for grains, raft systems are usually for leafy greens. Media type systems are usually for fruiting and flowering crops. Although again, we usually take those out and put those in another system. The systems are definitely developed. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Have you
correctly?
been working a lot with grain crops at all? Like, what does that look like?
you're running to use. So, from the organic system or from the aquaponic system, you're running the nutrients to use in the field and growing types of crops that aren't going to grow well inside of a plastic tube or a DWC bed or something like that. Wheat just doesn't do wheat, corn. None of those things do very well in a raft system. Now I have actually grown, tobacco, corn, Molly mentioned hops, a lot of different things in hydroponics and organic hydroponics. But they always do better when they've got, more of a ground for their root zone.
So you're saying they don't do well on deep water culture systems, but have you tried them in media bed systems or hybrid systems?
Yeah, it's just that the sheer volume of grains that you're having to grow to meet any kind of a demand. Like wheat, for instance, you're not getting that much off the plant. You're doing big fields of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to fit very well inside of a media bed inside of a greenhouse.
Right, exactly. And media is actually pretty expensive, so why not?
Very expensive. One of the reasons why we got away from it, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the reasons.
Especially for commercial. That's why raft systems work so well, but, if you're talking about things that need a lot of support, then you're not going to grow standing crops like that on a raft system very well. So I can see why growing organic hydro, would fit, because you're not really using media, but you're using the soil and you're remediating it even as you take the water from the aquaponic system and put it in the ground. Mm-hmm. Have you had a lot of experience with that, or noticed the difference between crops growing in the ground versus crops being fed in the ground from aquaponic water versus crops growing in the ground without aquaponic water?
Well, okay. So the aquaponic water, the thing that I found that really sets it apart is the speed at which it takes off. You've already got so much biology happening in an aquaponic system if it's mature, that when you add that, when we were adding that to our raised beds, behind our house, the growth rate was staggering. It took off. Normally there's this delay, like when you stick a plant in the ground, and you're waiting like a few days or a week or something, and then all of a sudden you see, the apical tip comes out and starts growing and going from there. And then it's fairly rapid. But right away, the biology is already there. It's already breaking down the nutrients. It's already, working with the rhizosphere, the root system, and just creating an environment that the plant grows extremely well in. I think the variables that you could measure are infinite.
What is your biggest success with your aquaponics business so far?
I think Holly is spectacular. The fact that they already had a club and, the system got built and now they're going to have this physical thing to run with. I think the system that we're going to be building here in Dallas with a geothermal system, I think that's going to be mind blowing. It really is. The things, it's not necessarily the successes we've had with our own systems, but the successes that we've helped other people achieve, just get over that hurdle. They're $1 million in and they're like, oh crap, this is going wrong. And we're able to come in and then all of a sudden that one variable is switched around and everything works great. And you come back 3 months later and, it's like Little Shop of Horrors. The plants are just growing. Yeah. Molly, do you have anything to add? That's how I would define a success. Multiple levels.
I would say our success has really been the adaptation that we've done to the changing industry as it's grown. We've been determined to find a niche for ourselves with Imagine Aquaponics. We didn't really know what that was going to end up turning out like to begin with. We were really set on starting an urban farm. We thought that was the route to take. But when that didn't work out, we didn't give up. We decided that maybe consulting and teaching were okay. We were really resistant to that idea originally. But as we started doing it, we started realizing that we were really facilitating success for some fascinating and incredible people. It made it a lot more acceptable to us, and it made it really fulfilling. And we continue to adapt to this industry as it grows, as it matures, as there are more opportunities available in all areas. And that's what I see as our success. 6 years later, it's kind of incredible to see where we've been.
For all the people who are just getting, started with aquaponics, what resources do you suggest for those who want to, get to the next level?
I really like, we're both included in Meg Stout's book, I think that's a really great book. And, I hope she's not bothered by me saying this, but she actually sent one of the original drafts to us to look over. Meg Stout is an amazingly intelligent woman. I mean, you should get on her LinkedIn profile. I mean, she is extremely smart, and you'll never know it by just running into her and shaking hands, because she's also very humble. But her book, the Idiot's Guide to Aquaponic Gardening, is don't let the title fool you. It's got a lot of good information in it. But the original version that she sent us was like, wow. You asked a question about lighting, and I told you I didn't want to get too far into it because it's a whole rabbit hole. Well, she actually did, and she and I talked a lot about that, and she taught me some things. Her ability to collect information is amazing too. But then, the publishers reminded her that, hey, this is the Idiot's Guide. And so she had to kind of dumb it down a little bit. And so that's what, I have heard some critiques on the book that, it didn't go as far as it should have. And I'm like, well, she did, but, that's just the way it turned out with the publishers. Talking about lighting, I actually wrote the lighting chapter for Friendly Aquaponics' newest manual. They're going to send that to me.
I have that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes. The lighting chapter they asked me to write that up. And then Rob Torsellini, excellent source of some of the most honest, down-to-earth information you're ever going to get. I love his videos, as do so many other people. Elise Landis has always been an amazing resource. She's busy
TC
raising
Links,
family,
you should say.
TC Links. Yeah, we know her as Elise, but TC Links is what she's known on the interweb.
She does Duckaponics, right?
Right.
Yeah, she does.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. I want to get her on here.
Oh, you'll have a blast. She's and we still call her up, and I will subcontract her on things, just to bounce ideas off of her, for projects to this very day. And, so you don't hear much from her, but, I talk to her, several times a year still. Adam Cohen has been doing some really fantastic work, and
with Green Phoenix Aquaponics. And he, and I have been talking about doing a training together,
that will hopefully involve a international mystery guest. We've been talking for several months now on that. And the list would be long and wide, I think. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people doing some really great things.
So what related topic do you believe needs the most research, development, and experimentation in the aquaponics world?
Wow.
I think for me, the connection to kind of tying things back together, because you can't grow everything in aquaponics, like we were just saying. You're still going to need to grow corn. You're still going to need to grow grain. So how do you do that? Traditional soil-based farming consumes topsoil at an incredible rate. And, organic farming deals with that with amending with compost, with other mineral amendments. But
isn't it like 6 pounds of soils lost for every 1 pound of food or something like that?
It's pretty incredible,
Yeah.
But in any case, we have one piece of the puzzle here. Organic farmers across the country are figuring out other pieces of the puzzle. Organic permaculturists. There are people who are really just fantastic at what they do. And I think connecting all of those dots is the next step, because aquaponics can't grow everything, and it's not going to be the most efficient for everything either. So finding people who are doing things in the most efficient way, and connecting with them and figuring out what maybe they have, if we're going to do aquaculture on a large scale, we have to remove, fish manure from the water. Maybe that can be applied to farm fields in a really amazing way and used to grow grain. Just to give an example, there are so many dots that aren't being connected right now that it's just so exciting to think about the possibilities.
Really, truly, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And so there are so many ways that aquaponics is evolving today. Where do you see this technology heading in the next 20 years?
I think it's going to take the term that's being adopted by a lot of the people at the top of this game right now is the integrated agriculture. Paul Vanderwerf put it very nicely. He said, that a lot of investors and a lot of people, businessmen that are taking this seriously and want to build, put a lot of money into something, they're very scared of the word aquaponics. There's been too many Who was it?
High profile failures, really.
Rucosi's, the Aqua Shysters, I think Jim Rucosi put it. So it's on some level kind of gotten a bad name, and I want to again be very careful how I say that. But it has. I mean, there's a tinge to it now, and that's too bad. But what it is integrated agriculture, and I think that more and more things. I mean, like starting to work a lot not only with organic hydroponics and the subsets of those, like vermiponics, where you said are worms dangerous? Well, hope not, because we're actually creating systems that rely on those creatures to break things down within the system and grow plants. The sky's the limit. I mean, we were using rabbit feces, rabbit pellets to grow food early on. It's got to open up.
Not without precautions, but
not without precautions. Yes, the compost. I mean, just like you're growing any kind of compost, you have to maintain a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, and then test and do all of that stuff. But like the things that the one company in Wisconsin that was taking the methane from their cattle farm and heating and using that to heat their aquaponics greenhouse. Mm-hmm. So again,
biodigesters.
Biodigester, the scare factor of using cattle waste to grow plants. Well, you're still in a way using cattle waste to grow plants. You're keeping that environment warm so they'll grow.
Thank you so much, guys, for being on the Visionary Aquaponics podcast. It's been a pleasure.
For us too.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening to the Visionary Aquaponics podcast. To learn more about aquaponics, please visit our website at www.visionaryaquaponics.com. There you'll find more strategies, tips, and tricks to get you started in your aquaponics journey.